Good morning, everybody, and welcome to week 4 of MPA 594. My name is Jared Kachmar, and this week's assignment involves considering Graham T. Allison's approach within that of public and private management or organizations being fundamentally alike in all unimportant respects. So we're going to select one public and then one private organization that are basically similar in their approach or their just general overall message. And then I'm going to decide if they are alike or disliked by including 3 themes that are backed by 3 theorists from early public administration. Okay, now I know the main importance of this assignment is not to talk about the agencies per se, and it's more to focus on let's apply 3 themes to these organizations and let's consider Graham Allison's approach on what is public management. But I feel that this scenario is so unique just because of the United States Postal Service itself. I personally believe it is one of the most enduring American institutions of all time. Let's face it, it's one of the largest employers in the country. It is such a diverse system. I mean, the enormous communication network that has been set up to keep Americans connected is just, that part alone is unique. So while we're going to focus on the themes and focus on some theorists of early public administration and focus on the classical management theories, it's just important to talk about USPS a little bit, and I can't stress that enough. The United Parcel Service, so the difference that, how are they similar, how are they different a little bit, that is a global logistics company. So they are a multinational packaging delivery service. That is their job, mainly because they cannot deliver U.S. mail legally. They cannot deliver anything that's stamped U.S. mail to a homeowner or any constituent in that matter. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of these throughout the presentation and connecting them with our themes. It's just important to talk about the Postal Service, and we can kind of we're not going to go all the way back in the 1600s, but we're going to look at Ben Franklin, so we're going to look at his connection with Alexander Hamilton. The two were not the closest colleagues, but there is evidence and research reports that are out that will talk about how Alexander Hamilton had a role in shaping USPS with Benjamin Franklin, from the first postmaster to his idea that the United States government should be in charge of delivering mail to our citizens. And that's basically what this all goes back to. What is the role of public management? Is this something that the government should do? And this scenario, like I said, is unique. So this is not a scenario like private education. So, looking at a public university versus a private university, this is a delivery service. So both companies are similar in the fact that they are delivering something. So it's kind of stretching it a little bit, but that's where we're going to go. We're going to look at 3 themes, like I said, within classical management. We'll kind of stay on that path, and this is the last week for us here in the classical management section. So we're going to still, stay in that 1887 to 1935-ish time frame and really focus in on 3 theories, 3 themes. How can we apply them to USPS, and how does it make it different from UPS? The main purpose of this presentation is to develop a thesis in regards to Allison's approach with private and public organizations. And my thesis for this presentation states, while both organizations, USPS and UPS, are similar in their overall mission, they are not similar in all unimportant respects considering these following themes: the constitutional rights, efficiency, and social equity. So when we look at the constitutional rights, we'll include Woodrow Wilson. We will go back to Frederick Taylor when we talk about efficiency. And efficiency is a unique situation in this case because they're not similar in efficiency. Let's face it. If UPS is not accurate with their delivery and when they're going to deliver a package, you're not going to use UPS again. You're going to go to FedEx, or you're going to go to USPS, or you're going to go to some other way to deliver that package. USPS, we don't really have a choice. If I'm to mail a letter back to Connecticut, US mail, I only have one way to go, and that's the USPS. Whether they were late on the last letter or the last 50 letters, the sense of urgency and efficiency doesn't apply to USPS, and that's where we see a big difference between that of UPS. And we can kind of talk a little bit about that. And Graham Allison does talk about the measurement of performance. So performance measurements is what we're talking about mainly when we talk about efficiency. And he's right. There really is no bottom line for USPS. They lose millions of dollars every single year in their bottom line. However, the fact that when we look at Frederick Taylor and his scientific management theory, and the fact that is more in line with UPS as compared to that at USPS. Back to accountability there, the last theme, we'll look at Wilson and Goodnow, so we can kind of look at three theorists throughout that classical management period where we can kind of apply these directly to this scenario of public versus private administrations. The first theme we're going to talk about is the constitutional right theme. And anytime we talk the Constitution, we're going to talk Woodrow Wilson. We're also, since the United States Postal Service goes back directly to Ben Franklin and Alexander Hamilton, we'll touch on federalism a little bit. But obviously the key here is to establish what was written in the United States Constitution regarding post service, postal delivery, etc. And that we will take a look at Article 1, Section 8, which talks about the powers of Congress. So basically, in the Constitution, what powers does Congress have? And a lot of people get this confused when we talk about the mail in the post office. Everyone knows, well, it's a felony to touch people's mail, but they don't really know why. So what is in the Constitution that makes this so significantly different? And that is basically just 7 words, and that is to establish, and I quote, to establish post offices and post roads, unquote. That's all that is in the United States Constitution. It does not talk about Congress regulating the post office. It does not talk about setting prices. It does not talk about competition. But we know because of this constitutional right to establish them, it makes them different because they are not allowed to compete with the United States government, meaning these private organizations, FedEx, UPS. Because of this constitutional right, they cannot establish post offices because it would be against the law. It would be unconstitutional for a private organization to do that. And we know Alexander Hamilton favored a strong national government, and we knew his approach was one that took an active role in daily affairs of the nation. And what's a better example of a daily affair than delivering mail or mail service, especially back in that time period? So he felt that this should be a power and this should be a right for Congress and the United States government to deliver mail to the United States people, period. That was it. The key is, however, we can always debate the other side of this. What does that constitution right really mean? Okay, so Congress is not required to establish post office. That's the big difference, that word required. It just merely has the power to do so if it wanted to, and it obviously did. The Founding Fathers took this mailing, and I know I say USPS, it obviously wasn't called that back in 1700s. We saw the Postal Service Act in 1792, and then back in 1971, they changed their name to the United States Postal Service. But for the sake of the presentation, we're going to call them USPS. Anyways, the Founding Fathers had such a strong belief in USPS that this constitutional right played a key role in how it developed the organization. So, and the monopoly on the entire enterprise is how they're different. So we can't, even if UPS wanted to, they cannot mail anything that is stated that it's U.S. mail. It could deliver packages overweight and different things like that, but it cannot deliver U.S. mail or it cannot establish a post office. But let's say Congress never did so. If Congress never opened any post office, would UPS be able to deliver personal mail? And then it goes back to, let's look at 1792, the Postal Service Act. Well, Congress then establishes the Post Office Department back in that time period. So if they wanted to amend something, if a private institution came along and said, I believe USPS should not be allowed just to deliver U.S. mail on this constitutional right belief, because I believe that we should repeal an act of Congress, and that act of Congress would be in 1792, which was the Postal Service Act. They would not need a constitutional amendment, as far as I'm concerned, because they are not trying to amend the fact that Congress has the power to establish post offices. So it is a unique situation, of course. Anytime we talk about the Constitution, it definitely can be interpreted in many different ways by many different organizations. But the fact of the matter is, the powers of Congress are to establish post offices and post roads. This constitutional right, and we know from multiple theories that this requires these organizations to be different. Okay, next we're going to look at efficiency as our theme, and obviously that ties into Frederick Taylor and the scientific management theory. And the key for us is we are going to see how this theme really proves our thesis is accurate. So we said that they are not similar in all unimportant aspects, and efficiency is an aspect that you think these two companies, organizations, agencies would be their number one goal, to let's deliver the mail as efficient as possible. What is the most efficient way our employees can do this job? And we know that's true for UPS. We see it with their money back guarantee and their expected delivery dates and their guarantees on that. This is how they separate from their competitors like FedEx, and this is how they bridge the gap between them and USPS. But it's not the case for USPS. Our independent government agency does not thrive on efficiency. It's more a brand that's based on a promise, and that promise is to deliver the mail. It's not to deliver the mail as efficient as possible. We know that. We hear stories on postal service workers for the government that walked 25 miles to deliver the mail because it's the constitutional right for them to do that. So when Congress established those post office and post roads, if it takes extra amount of time to go get to an address, they still have to do it. That is the promise that is made to the people of the United States, and the post office and the post service is supposed to follow that. UPS completely different. But anytime we talk about Taylor's theory, so what company is using Taylor's theory? It's maybe not exactly that way, but UPS is pretty close. We know that Taylor wanted to provide tools for workers to do two things, right? To enhance their output and efficiency. So minimal work, more of an assembly line atmosphere, and that was the case with UPS. I mean, now technology has taken over a little bit, but it is more of an assembly line type atmosphere. So how do we get our employees to do one or two things, to do it well, to keep this assembly line moving? And that's the structure of their organization. They do have drivers, but we're going to limit their routes, or we're going to make their routes the most efficient. How are we going to use science to find the most efficient route? Whereas the United States Postal Service, they have to go wherever they have to go. I mean, it doesn't matter, if they're going to reroute everything because it's more efficient. They're not going to do that. So we definitely think that UPS is more like Frederick Taylor and more like Taylorism, scientific management theory, etc. And anytime we think of Taylor, the advantages of, okay, we know that this theory kind of faded away because employee morale would get decreased, and he never looked at the behavioral side of employees. But there is some principles that are very good. So the two or three that I always think about when I think of Taylor in this theory are, let's enhance production and let's decrease inaccuracies. And UPS does a pretty good job at that, especially decrease inaccuracies. But we know, let's not say that the USPS is not making efficient as far as production, because let's face it, I mean, and this is back in 2000, they delivered to 135 million addresses. They delivered over 46% of the world's mail. I mean, that's 200 billion pieces of mail. So that production is there, but efficiency is different. Okay, the last theme we're going to look at is social equity and accountability. And we're going to look at Frank Goodenow and Woodrow Wilson. And we know these two are connected, with Wilson's the study of administration and Goodenow's politics and administration piece. The key to always remember with these two is to know that they both believe that politics and administration are different, but they are inevitably tied back to the same political system. And with Goodenow, the key was always the three distinct branches: the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the administrative branch. And the accountability piece comes with how he felt that the executive branch should allow itself to be subjected to the same administrative policies and procedures that are governing the people. And we see Wilson's accountability kind of in the same way, and he always emphasized that the government should face the demands of the ever-growing population. So with the Industrial Revolution and immigration taking over, he felt in order for the government to be successful, it would have to adapt and rely on old traditions. And one way we see this is when he implemented the Civil Service Reform Act, which allowed American citizens to competitively apply for government employment. So looking at our scenario and looking at accountability, both companies and both organizations look at it differently, I believe. The private industry, while it does focus on a value-based employee, their accountability is based back to their performance. And the United States Postal Service, for instance, that public agency, is really a value-based job, and the way that they look at that position is more in line with these two theorists. And one way we can kind of tell by this is the commitment to ethics that the United States Postal Service makes. We know that all postal employees are required to place loyalty to the Constitution, the laws, and the ethical principles above, and that comes from Section 662 of the Postal Service Employee Labor and Relations Manual. So we know that that is the purpose of accountability within those organizations, and they are different. One is a private organization that places more accountability on performance, and the other one is related back more to the Constitution. Okay, we can take a brief recap and conclusion of our three themes, and that was the constitutional right, efficiency, and social equity and accountability. And we know that those three themes are why I believe that these two organizations, although they're very similar, the United States Postal Service and the United Parcel Service, they are different in all unimportant aspects. One of the big keys here is obviously the monopoly that the United States Postal Service has. I know I did not go in depth on the actual organizational structure of these two organizations. They are very complex. As we talked about, the United States Postal Service is one of the largest employers of the country. But the always key that we kind of look at is, should the government be controlling the mail delivery? And the alternative to that is privatization. And there's many different scenarios that could work out. Obviously, the overall goal would be to maximize shareholder value if they were to privatize. So they would need a whole different set of financial strategies to help contribute to that overall goal. Another possibility could entail the government contracting with the current Postal Service and other outside organizations like UPS to provide retail and delivery services in unprofitable markets, because we know when we talk about efficiency, we know UPS isn't going to deliver to an area if it's not going to make a profit for them, whereas the constitutional right and the accountability of the USPS, they're going to deliver whether they make money or lose money. So these two organizations, again, they're very similar in the fact that they do deliver mail, they deliver packages, but they're separate. And going back all the way in the 1600s, we know Alexander Hamilton and Benjamin Franklin and federalism had a role in help making sure that the national government was in charge of establishing post offices. So that plays a key aspect in this scenario as well.